What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing a criminally underrated duo that absolutely nobody else is using in the Great League right now, and that's Solrock and Lunatone, both gaining access to a different weathable typing this season. I know they have a dual typing that's weak to a lot of common meta typings, but they feel incredibly flexible and can still have at least neutral play into most of their hardest counters. I'm also running Hisui and Samurai in the lead that gained access to Sacred Sword this season, so Fury Cutter plus Sacred Sword, that combination feels very similar actually to the Psywave plus Weatherball combination that my backline is running. Now before we get into the question of the day, I want to say that the channel is just under 200 subscribers away from hitting 35k subs, which would be an awesome milestone to hit before the end of the year, and I know that nearly 50% of my viewers actually aren't subscribed, so if you do enjoy this content and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button as it really does help out the channel. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What's the best Pokemon you've used this season that hardly anyone else uses in the Great League? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Samurott into Primeape. So of course, this is not a great matchup for me. I'm going to be safe swapping into Solrock, and unfortunately met with Azumarill. Now previously, I would have been running Solar Beam on my Solrock, which absolutely would do insane damage to the Azumarill, but the opponent is going to no-shield, and you can see Rock Slide actually does respectable damage. These Psy Waves are really chunking. They are going to bait with an Ice Beam there, but that's okay with me. I can now look to overfarm, fire off the next Rock Slide, and Rock Slide honestly probably gets the KO from this range, so it does grab the shield there. And we can reach yet another Rock Slide. Rock Slide number 3 grabs the final shield, and if they commit to a full farm down, Solrock still not done yet. Able to reach a last second Weatherball. That's resisted damage, but it gets the KO. Solrock able to flip switch advantage and grab a shield advantage in that matchup. Absolutely huge. At this point, we come in with the Lunatone. I'm going to no-shield the first move as they will be able to boost up their attack stat, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Clodsire. Now, previously, whilst of course Psywave does hit for super effective damage, Lunatone only had resisted charge moves to throw there if you ran the recommended moveset with, I believe, Moonblast as a secondary charge move, but Weatherball really helps out in that matchup. A bank a second Weatherball there for the Primeape. Now, we go for Icy Wind, we get the KO. They can actually come in, fully farm me down, but it doesn't really matter. We've still got a shield. Yes, we lose CMP, but of course, we can just shield up the Rage Fist, go for the Weatherball. Weatherball will be enough damage to take out the Primeape from this range, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see Hisui and Samurott into a Gastrodon. So this is definitely where we want to see it. Gastrodon is probably one of the trickier Pokemon for me to deal with just because my backline is going to struggle quite a bit, and even Samurott here with neutral damage isn't going to be the best Pokemon just because it is fairly glassy, but I'm actually able to reach an Icy Wind and then a Sacred Sword here, throwing on CMP. And you know what, at this point, I'm actually happy to let this go through. The opponent's actually on Earth Power, so that gets the KO despite being debuffed. And unfortunately, it means that here I'm gonna probably have to use a shield. I'm gonna shield this, and the opponent actually on double nukes with Water Pulse and Earth Power, which is quite interesting to see. They're gonna come in with a Florges here, which of course does have access to Chilling Water and maybe even Trailblades as well, both of which are gonna hit for super effective damage up against my backline. Here I threw the Weatherball just because I wanted to throw before they debuffed me, but actually they overfarmed quite a lot there, so not ideal for me. We catch a charge move onto Solrock, however they can already reach another Chilling Water, double debuffing me, but they swap back into Gastrodon just to be fully farmed down. And now let's see the comeback in with that Florges, so I'm going to go straight for the Rock Slide. Rock Slide, remember, it's debuffed, so it doesn't get the KO. We get the Psywave farm down, and their final Pokemon going to be a Skeledirge. We bank a Rock Slide just in case we need it, but actually, Lunatone already there. Rock Slide gets the one-shot up against the Skeledirge, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's top on there, into the next battle. We see Mandibuzz in the lead, so this is fine with me, of course, depending on what their fast move is, then it might be okay for my backline as well, and since they're on Air Slash, my backline should be fine as well, but we can actually stay in for now, go for an Icy Wind. Icy Wind is going to debuff their attack stats. I'm actually still going to stay in just to see what their other charge move is, because a lot of Mandibuzz are running like Foul Play and Shadow Ball this season, in which case, we don't really want to swap out and try and make a catch onto my Solrock. However, since we've seen the Aerial Ace, I'm now going to swap out, hopefully having caught an Aerial Ace once again, again, and it is going to be another Aerial Ace. Of course, that was double debuffed and resisted damage. Really doesn't do that much there. They come in with a Galarian Stunfisk, but that's fine. We've got Fire Weather Ball 4 coverage, and we can reach back-to-back Weather Balls here before they even throw an Earthquake. We're now going to what the hell? We're going to grab the final shield from the opponent. At this point, I'm happy with that, but the opponent base with a Rock Slide, that's going to force them to use even more energy. Now they're going to be energy dry. Rock Slide gets the KO there. We're going to come back in with the Samurott. I'm going to overfarm just a little bit, not too much, just because I don't want them to potentially snipe me with a Pokemon in the back. So we fire off the Sacred Sword. We get the KO. I'm going to swap now into Lunatone, and whilst I could throw the Charge Move here, I don't know what they've got in the back. So actually, I'm just going to shield this and look to overfarm massively. And that overfarm is going to be very beneficial, as they've got a Pokemon that would have been quite problematic for me, but we've got so much energy that I can actually fire off back-to-back Rock Slides before they even reach their first Surf or potential Shadow Ball. And at this point, we've put them into range where we can just sideway farm them down. So of course, I use my final shield on the Shadow Ball. We get the full farm down, and Rock Slide, of course, guarantees the KO, but it's kind of a Weather Ball showcase. So Weather Ball Ice takes out the Mandibuzz, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle, Samurott into a Kanto Marowak. So, of course, once again, this is probably where we want to see it for this team. I do have access to Icy Wind. I could have thrown straight away there, but just in case the opponent doesn't throw immediately, what I don't want to do is throw an alignment and give away a full Mud Slap in for free. Of course, the opponent can just throw immediately because we've got a one-turn fast move. They're always going to let one fast move go through there, so it doesn't really matter when they throw. Now, I've debuffed them, which means I can just barely live the Bone Club there, reach a second Icy Wind, and now I'm actually going to swap into my Lunatone, hoping I've put them into range where one Weather Ball will get the KO. If this doesn't KO, then maybe you could argue that Samurott probably should have just allowed it to go down there, because now I am switch locked, and they do still reach the Bone Club anyways. However, we do get the sideway farm down, and let's see what they've got in the back. They're going to come in with Azumarill, which isn't really ideal for me, but we do have a slight energy advantage. I can fire off the Rock Slide. Rock Slide is going to, of course, connect there as they have no shields remaining, and here I'm definitely just going to shield this. The opponent is going to go for a Play Rough. They are going to stay in with the Azumarill, and I can probably put them into range where I can go for a Rock Slide and then just sideway farm them down. You see, we're actually able to do exactly that. Their final Pokemon, however, is going to be a Bastiodon, and while Samurott does have Sacred Sword coverage, it is just way too low there. We are never going to reach a Sacred Sword there, unfortunately. So we're going to fire off the next Weather Ball. I believe they're one away from the next charge move, so I'm going to go for a few more sideways. They're going to swap into my Samurott, able to catch a charge move here. However, unfortunately, Solrock, whilst we are super spammy, I don't think we're going to get the KO up against this Bastion. So at this point, I'm actually going to come in with the Lunatone, hoping maybe we reach a Rock Slide there. We don't, so we have to go for a resisted Ice Weather Ball. Weather Ball really doesn't do that much damage there, and whilst technically we could have reached back-to-back Weather Balls there potentially if we did go for better timing, you can see it still wouldn't do enough damage there. Bastion, unfortunately, just too tricky once the Samurott had gone down, and so unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's up on there into the next battle. We see Greninja in the lead. A great lead matchup for me, as I will resist the typical charge moves on my Samurott. The opponent is going to go straight for the Hydro Cannon, which does do quite a lot of damage there, actually, despite being resisted. Then I'm going to swap into a Corviknight. So I'm going to go for an Icy Wind, and then I'm going to look to try and swap and make a catch of the Air Cutter. Of course, I expect them to have Payback, and if they don't, maybe they've got Iron Head as well, both of which are going to hit for super effective, and their fast move is also super effective. So whilst we are going to resist the Air Cutters, it's not the most dominant matchup for the Solrock, so that's why I did try and make that catch, which we were able to do, and they full send a Payback here before swapping back into Greninja. However, we've already got the Rock Slide. Rock Slide gets the KO there. They come back in with the Corviknight, and I can still outpace them to a Weather Ball before they reach the next Payback. At this point, we're actually going to snipe with the Samurott here. Can Sacred Sword get the KO? Sacred Sword barely doesn't take them out there. But at this point, I feel pretty good about Lunatone sweeping this game with a shield advantage. They do get the boost. It doesn't really make a difference here. I'm going to wait out my switch clock, come in with the Lunatone, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Kanto Marowak. And of course, having access to that Ice Weather Ball is huge for me, as it does big damage in the matchup. Unfortunately, not quite enough for me to fully farm them down, but it doesn't really matter, as we can go for a second one, taking out the Marowak, sideway farming down the Corviknight, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. We see Abomasnow in the lead. Now, something you might have noticed is this team is triple weak to grass. However, basically the only grass types I saw was a single Abomasnow and then a few different Credilli, which, by the way, is actually pretty good for all of my Pokemon here because I've got ice coverage on 2 of them, as well as Fury Cutter and Sacred Sword. Actually, Samurot's pretty good into Credilli in general. And then, of course, I've got 2 Pokemon that do resist the acid fast food pressure from the Credilli as well. So, honestly, not that bad at all. Of course, if they have other grass types, then it might be problematic. But even then, a lot of grass types are also sub-poison, where Psywave is super effective. Fury Cutter's also super effective into other grass types. So basically, it's really not that bad. But anyways, we're going to fire off back-to-back Weather Balls up against the Medicham here. Fire Weather Ball is going to connect there, as of course they have no shield remaining. The opponent tries to make a catch. It does not work out for them, and I can full send a Rock Slide. Rock Slide does decent damage. I realized they would be reaching a Bone Club, so I'm actually going to catch it onto my Samurott. Bone Club is going to, of course, connect here. The opponent is forced to throw another charge move, otherwise I'm going to reach a move of my own, but I've put them into range where hopefully I can Psywave farm them down. Unfortunately, actually just barely not able to do so, but you know what, we've still got a shield, might as well use it here. Bone Club will be super effective, and now we come out with a Weather Ball loaded. Weather Ball is going to be enough damage to take out the Medicham, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. We can see Licky in the lead. So this is a fine matchup for me here. Of course, Sacred Sword going to hit for super effective damage. It's not going to deal that much damage, so I will need 2 of them to get the KO here. And you can see 2 Body Slams pretty much KOs the Samurott as well. So it's not that dominant of a matchup. And of course, I don't really have the freedom of I have the freedom of throwing straight away here, but if the opponent doesn't throw, they can go for an extra rollout. However, they actually just end up letting that go through anyways. So now I'm going to swap into my Solrock, and I'm not going to throw straight away here, as I do anticipate the opponent potentially swapping out of this matchup eventually. However, they swap into Gastrodon. That is not ideal for me, of course. We could have access to Solar Beam, so we end up grabbing a shield there. But yeah, it doesn't really help me. I can go for a Rock Slide. Maybe should go for Weather Balls, just because maybe I can get to a second Weather Ball before they fully farm me down. Yeah, it looks like I would have just barely got there. But either way, it's not a great position to be in. So at this point, I'm going to come in with my Lunatone, and the fact they throw straight away, maybe they go straight for a Body Slam, and they actually do exactly that. At this point, I'm going to look to try and swap and catch the next charge move, which is going to be a Water Pulse. So actually working out for me. However, they're just doing too much damage with the fast pressure of Mud Slap. I can get the KO here, but damage is done. There's no way I'm taking out a Azumarill before they bubble farm me down, and so unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's to what the hell? But GG's to the opponent there. Wow, sometimes my brain thinks a little bit faster than my mouth can move. So anyways, into the next battle, we are going to see a 2 cannon in the lead. I say swap into Solrock. Again, could have access to the solar beams the opponent ends up shielding, but actually you're going to see Rock Slide does quite a lot of damage there. And if I really wanted to, I could double shield here and fully farm them down. However, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to come in with a Samurott. The opponent doesn't throw straight away there. Not really sure what they did, but either way, I'm happy with that. Then I come in with their final Pokemon, which is going to be a Carbink, which is pretty bulky. However, Lunatone actually does decent damage in this matchup. You see Rock Slide didn't do that much damage, but these Psywaves really add up over time. Now, honestly, there aren't many Psywave users that deal a lot of fast speed pressure here, so we're going to go for Psywave and then Rock Slide again. And actually, we don't need to throw again. We can commit to a full farm down, getting it just before they get to the next charge move. I swap into my Samurott, basically just force them to full send a Beak Blast, which they do, but we've got back-to-back Weather Balls here. It's going to be super effective damage. It's non-stat, but it doesn't matter. This is a 2 cannon we're talking about. So Weather Ball number 2 will be taking out the 2 cannon, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's to opponent there into the next battle, Samurott into a Malamar. So this is a really good matchup for me. Those Fury Cutters shredding through their HP. So they're forced to swap out. They swap into a double, and we've got access to Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword going to hit for super effective damage. Now here they could have access to payback. However, they're actually going to allow me to outpace them, fire off the Weather Ball straight away, and Weather Ball is going to be shielded. I'm going to shield here as well, and the opponent is going to go for a Wild Charge, probably implying that they don't have payback. So at this point, I'm going to no-shield the next charge move, as Wild Charge is going to connect, and they swap back into Malamar. Now, at this point, they've got Psywave as well, so I probably don't need to swap out of this matchup here. I think I'm just going to wait for them to throw some energy, and they do exactly that. Now, they do overfarm, meaning they probably can reach a superpower into my Samurott before I can fully Fury Cut to farm them down, but that's absolutely fine with me. They go for superpower, we get the Fury Cut to farm down, they're going to come in with their final Pokemon, an Emolga, and that is fine with me. We can go straight for Icy Wind. They no-shield that, and now Lunatone can come in. Of course, Acrobatics going to be resisted, so that's probably their nuke charge move. They very unlikely have access to Thunderbolt, so at this point we can go for back-to-back Weather Balls. First one is going to be shielded, second Weather Ball will be enough damage to very comfortably take out the Emolga, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on their into next battle. We see Galvantula in the lead. Now, I played this matchup horribly. Basically, I stay in initially thinking, you know what, if they're on Fury Cutter, maybe I don't want to swap out straight away. But actually, Fury Cutter hits my entire team for super effective damage. So, I probably should be swapping out anyways, even if they are on Fury Cutter. But anyways, I don't know why I stayed in there. Of course, Volt Switch is now a really good fast move. So, we're at this point, we're in a really bad situation, of course. They're able to grab a shield advantage up against the Solrock because I swapped out so late. And then they just come in and hard punish with a Sableye anyways. So yeah, really not ideal from my end, but we're going to no-shield this. Just going to be a foul play. I don't think I can quite commit to a full farm down, so I do fire off a Sacred Sword at the last second. Sacred Sword is going to get the KO there. I'm now going to swap into my Lunatone, and I will outpace them, but I overfarm. What am I doing? Things, honestly, I'm basically doing everything I could possibly do wrong in this battle right now. So we throw on CMP. Of course, I'm now debuffed. They are actually going to shield that, though, and their final Pokemon is going to be an Alolan Marowak. So I'm going to go for the Rock Slide here. Rock Slide is going to hit for super effective damage, and the opponent actually ends up no shielding, which I thought was very surprising. However, it doesn't really matter. Shadow Bone gets the KO there. I'm now going to overfarm as much as possible, but I cannot win this game anymore. I can go for Sacred Sword, grab the final shield, and I can win CMP. However, Galvantula can just come in, go for one more Volt Switch, fully fast move farming down, and I do lose that game there. But honestly, I just played that battle so poorly. Definitely the worst played battle that I had with this team. But GG's to that trainer anyways. Into the next battle, going to see Altaria in the lead. So this is actually a great lead matchup for me. I'm going to stay in, go straight for an Icy Wind as I can outpace them. And the opponent doesn't shield there. Now I'm going to swap into Solrock as I would resist both the Sky Attack and the Flamethrower if they're running it. Now, not only that, we're able to bait out a Credilli, we can go for the Rock Slide, and I'm actually able to reach a Weather Ball here as the opponent underestimates just how fast Solrock gets to that Weather Ball. Actually going for a Rock Slide first, you then get to Weather Ball in just 8 more turns, which is insanely fast, and similarly, that's the same scenario here with the Icy Wind and Samurott, and then getting to Sacred Sword in just 8 more turns. So I'm able to grab a shield here, I'm now going to shield this, and then I anticipated they would swap back into Altaria trying to snipe, grab my final shield, but they actually did not do that. However, they come in with a Gastrodon, and we do have access to Weather Ball here. Weather Ball is going to hit for neutral damage. Of course, not super effective as they are part water. And here, honestly, I thought they'd throw straight away, so I do end up throwing on very poor timing, but I am just barely able to reach another Weather Ball. That is very fortunate on my end, but Weather Ball gets the KO there. I'm going to swap out straight away, and the opponent, I don't think they will reach back-to-back charge moves here. We're going to shield the Sky Attack. The opponent, not able to get there. And of course, one more Fury Cutter takes out Credilli, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. You see Gastrodon in the lead once again. So once again, this is definitely where we want to see it for this team. And they're actually going to go straight for a Body Slam. So I don't really want to no-shield the first charge move just because Body Slam is going to deal decent damage here. However, I can actually no-shield that, go for the Icy Wind, and then still reach a Sacred Sword before they fully farm me down. So Sacred Sword is going to grab a shield there, and then swap into my Solrock, and the opponent will fire a charge move. Now they're debuffed, but I'm going to shield anyways, and they do full send the Water Pulse. However, they're staying in here, and this is just going to be a debuffed Body Slam, which is non-stab. It's also resisted damage, so I definitely don't mind no shielding there. They come in with Sir Titan, and now I'm remembering this is also one of the worst battles I did with this team by far. So here, I overfarm. I end up losing CMP. Honestly, I don't really know the stats of Solrock on Lunatone, so yeah, I wasn't really sure if we win or lose CMP in a lot of situations. And then here, I think this is kind of just an issue with Psywave being so obnoxious, like taking up the entire screen, being very bright. I didn't realize they were already at back-to-back Leaf Blades here, so I was going to go for a couple more Psywaves. If I didn't get the farm down, I'd swap out, but nope, I miscounted. And like I could so easily win that game. First of all, if I throw a weather ball on my Solrock or my Lunatone at any point, I win that game there. But I don't know what I was doing. Honestly, so poor on my end. But trust me, those are the two worst battles. That's it. Like any other battles, if I do lose them, it's just because my opponent played better or they had a better team. It's not because I just completely threw it away like I did with that one. But anyway, GG Star Trainer, we're going to see a Wigglytuff here. So I'm going to go for a weather ball, as maybe I can grab a shield here. Weather ball is gonna be shielded, and we can still reach another weather ball because we baited. Now weather ball, of course, we're debuffed. It doesn't deal that much damage. They can still fully fight me down. However, I assume they're probably just going to go straight for an Icy Wind, so I actually come in with the Samurott here, which is going to resist the Icy Wind damage. Then I swap Ice Knife with Lunatone, and I'm able to get the full farm down. They come in with Annihilate, which is absolutely fine with me, especially since they come in with a Talonflame. Looks like they were trying to catch the Weather Ball or whatever my other charge move was, but Rock Slide easily gets the one-shot. Now, we can fire off the Weather Ball. Weather Ball is going to connect. It doesn't deal that much damage, but we're already at yet another Weather Ball. Weather Ball number 2 takes out the Annihilate, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent into the next battle. We're going to see Dunsparce in the lead. So, this is going to be a slightly positive matchup for me, but similar to the Licky matchup, where, of course, they can tank one Sacred Sword fairly comfortably. I'm never going to be able to fully farm them down. So, at this point, I'm actually going to shield this just because I don't know what they've got in the back here. So, now I'm going to look to overfarm. I tried to throw on CMP. The opponent does throw immediately, so that is good for me. And they are actually just going to no-shield that. Now, they come in with a Primeape. That's fine with me. Solrock is going to be able to tank a Rage Fist relatively comfortably. The opponent is going to stay in this matchup, taking big faster damage from the Psywaves. We can go for Weather Ball here, and if they shield this and commit to a full farm down, we can reach yet another Weather Ball. So Weather Ball should be grabbing the final shield. However, they do get a very aggressive farm down, and unfortunately, they now have back-to-back Rage Fists. So I'm actually going to come in with the Lunatone. I'm going to shield the first one, and then I assume they're just going to throw the next one straight away. So I'm actually going to swap into my Samurott, and then, of course, catch a, well, double boosted, but resisted Rage Fist there. Unfortunately, they still get up one more Karate Chop, but their final Pokemon is Morpeko. We reach the Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword does huge damage, and it puts them into range where even double resisted Psywaves can get the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. We're going to see Skeledirge in the lead. So, a bit of an awkward matchup for me just because Samurott only has resisted charge moves to throw. So, I mean, I guess that's the same for Samurott, for the Skeledirge. However, they do at least have stab damage, and they will hit a lot harder with their charge moves. But anyways, they're going to come in with a Rangaroo. I'm going straight for Rock Slide here. Rock Slide going to deal respectable damage, and the opponent will reach a charge move. Now, the opponent is going to go for a Brutal Swing, which I'm able to tank, and here, potentially, should have just committed to a Rock Slide, as I will live the confusion damage. I did think about swapping out into my Samurott, but unfortunately it doesn't work out, and then they get damage registration error, which is very unfortunate for me, as they can full send a Trailblaze, meaning now, even though they've got resisted charge moves, Samurott will be going down to a Torch Song. So, of course, if they didn't get off the Trailblaze there, I could have very comfortably no-shielded and tanked it, and of course, they've got a Pokemon now which can permanently debuff my attack stat, which is not ideal. Of course, all shields are now down on their end. However, I cannot get the KO with a Rock Slide anymore. I'm going to throw as late as possible, but you're going to see Rock Slide just won't be enough damage to take out the Dugong, meaning they get to another charge move. At this point, I have to just call that's an Icy Wind, which it is, but they come back in with a Skeledirge, and I'm not going to be able to take them out here. So I'm going to shield this anyways as they fire off the Torch Song. I'm going to throw here. I was hoping this would still KO. However, you're going to see Rock Slide doesn't quite take them out there, but we still get the farm down, and we end up going down to the Ice Shard damage there. Unfortunately, I think if actually I went for 4 Psywaves, then I threw the Rock Slide into the Skeledirge, I think I would have come out with the Weather Ball up against the Dugong. But anyways, GG's Turtle Trainer into the next battle. We're going to see a Spidops in the lead, which is a bit tricky for me. However, I am resisting the fast food damage, and I can get to these Icy Winds as quickly as they reach the lunges. So it's not the worst thing ever, of course. I can go for a second Icy Wind here, debuff them once again, and at this point, Lunge isn't going to deal that much damage. So I'm going to no-shield this, and then going to swap into my Solrock as I will outpace them to the charge move. They end up swapping, but they catch onto Dugong, and the opponent's going to end up shielding anyway, so that's absolutely fine with me. I can now fire off the Rock Side, and with the chip damage from that Weather Ball, this Rock Side is going to deal decent damage there. I'm going to no-shield this. If they drill on them, fair enough, but they actually go for an Icy Wind bait. So at this point, I'm going to look to overfarm, get a bank of charge move, and then swap into my Samurott. Icy Wind gets the KO there. We can now come in with the Lunatone, and I will be able to sideway farm them down. Remember, we've got a charge move on the Solrock already banked. They've got a lunge on the Spidops, I believe, but their final Pokemon is going to be a shiny Dragalge. Now, this is super effective. It's going to be an Aqua Tail, but we can tank it. I wait for the opponent to swap back into Spidops, and now we can go straight for Weather Ball. Weather Ball gets the KO there, and we can go for another Weather Ball into the Dragalge coming back in. And of course, it's super effective. It doesn't quite get the KO, but one more Side Wave gets the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to put there into possibly the final battle of this video, leading into a Blastoise, so a neutral matchup here, and unfortunately, even though they're going to go for Hydro Cannons, 2 Hydro Cannons will be enough damage to take out the Samurott. So, again, not that comfortable of a matchup, even though technically we should have the advantage here. But anyway, it's going to go for a Sacred Sword, and I'm not confident that the next Sacred Sword would quite take them out, so what I didn't want to do is throw my energy and then barely just miss out on KOing. So instead, I'm going to farm up 2 at least back-to-back Sacred Swords here before throwing, and you can see it doesn't quite take them out, so I would have needed to shield anyways, but at this point they're going to come in with Credilli. I go straight for Icy Wind, and then I swap into my Solrock. Now, my plan here is hopefully that the opponent would swap out there, but either way, it doesn't really matter too much because I can go straight for Rock Side, and I've debuffed them, so I might live a Grass Knot here. However, the opponent's going to go for a Rock Tomb instead, which is absolutely fine with me, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Clodsire. So Lunatone is looking primed to sweep this game here. The opponent is going to shield a Weather Ball, which was already debuffed. At this point, I'm definitely going to no-shield. I didn't throw intentionally because I was hoping the opponent would throw it immediately. It doesn't really matter too much there, but either way, I'm going to shield here as the opponent is going to go ahead and full send another Earthquake. I can now look to overfarm. They swap back into Credilli, and we've got well over back-to-back Weather Balls here. First one will easily take out the Credilli, and we can go for one more Side Wave just to practice throwing on good timing. Weather Ball number 2 will be taking out the Clodsire, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.